The lies linking me with the disgraceful Jeffrey Epstein need to end today. The individuals lying about me are devoid of ethical standards, humility, and respect. I do not object to their ignorance, but rather I reject their mean-spirited attempts to defame my reputation. I never been friends with Epstein. Donald and I were invited to the same parties as Epstein from time to time, since overlapping in social circles is common in New York City and Palm Beach. To be clear, I never had a relationship with Epstein or his accomplice, Maxwell. My email reply to Maxwell cannot be categorized as anything more than casual correspondence.
All right, team. Dr. John, back behind the mic. A decades-old, unproven rumor about Melania Trump has resurfaced with new energy, fueled by claims from a woman with a complicated legal history. The allegation has never been proven in any court or by credible journalism and has been consistently denied, yet it's now dominating political conversations again. According to Ungaro, the widely told story about how Melania met Donald Trump at a party in 1998, introduced by modeling agent Paolo Zampoli, is actually a cover for something far more scandalous. She claims that Zampoli privately confessed to her over the years that the introduction was actually made by Jeffrey Epstein, the disgraced financier whose name has become synonymous with exploitation and criminal behavior. Ungaro further alleges that Melania had been working as an escort connected to Epstein's network before that meeting ever took place.
My polite reply to her email doesn't amount to anything more than a trivial note. I am not Epstein's victim. Epstein did not introduce me to Donald Trump. I met my husband by chance at a New York City party in 1998. This initial encounter with my husband is documented in detail in my book, Melania. The first time I crossed paths with Epstein was in the year 2000 at an event Donald and I attended together. At the time, I had never met Epstein and had no knowledge of his criminal undertakings. Numerous fake images and statements about Epstein and me have been circulating on social media for years now. Be cautious about what you believe. These images and stories are completely false.
Now, let's be absolutely clear about what we have here before this goes any further. We have one person making a claim about what someone else supposedly told them in private conversations spanning many years. That is the entire evidentiary foundation. There are no documents, no photographs, no financial records, no corroborating witnesses, no anything that could independently verify this story. The recording where Ungaro made these claims has already been deleted from its original posting location, though of course it had already spread across the internet like wildfire before anyone could hit the delete button. The speed with which this story has traveled is genuinely remarkable, but perhaps not surprising given the elements involved. You have a sitting first lady, you have one of the most notorious figures in recent American criminal history, you have a secretive backstory involving glamour and power, and you have the suggestion that the official narrative has been hiding something all along.
I'm not a witness or a named witness in connection with any of Epstein's crimes. My name has never appeared in court documents, depositions, victim statements, or FBI interviews surrounding the Epstein matter. I have never had any knowledge of Epstein abuse of his victims. I was never involved in any capacity. I was not a participant, was never on Epstein's plane, and never visited his private island. I have never been legally accused or convinced of a crime in connection with Epstein's sex trafficking, abuse of minors, and other repulsive behavior. The false smears about me from mean-spirited and politically motivated individuals and entities looking to cause damage to my good name, to gain financially and climb politically, must stop.
These ingredients are practically designed to capture attention and generate endless social media engagement. But attention and engagement are not evidence, and that distinction is getting lost in the rush to share the latest shocking revelation. Melania Trump has not stayed silent on this matter, and that consistent response pattern is worth examining closely. When the rumor first exploded back in 2016 through a UK tabloid publication, she didn't simply issue a denial and hope it would go away. She filed a defamation lawsuit seeking $150 million in damages, with her legal team calling the allegations outright lies. That's not the response of someone who wants the story to quietly fade away. That's the response of someone willing to spend significant resources fighting back through the legal system. More recently, when Hunter Biden brought up similar claims in a public interview, Melania's team responded with threats of a billion-dollar lawsuit. Again, not a quiet denial, not an attempt to ignore the controversy, but aggressive legal pushback signaling that these allegations are taken extremely seriously and will be met with the full force of legal action.
My attorneys and I have fought these unfounded and baseless lies with success and will continue to maintain my sound reputation without hesitation. To date, several individuals and companies have been legally obligated to publicly apologize and retract their lies about me, such as Daily Beast, James Carville, and HarperCollins, UK. Now is the time for Congress to act. Epstein was not alone. Several prominent male executives resigned from their powerful positions after this matter became widely politicized. Of course, this doesn't amount to guilt, but we still must work openly and transparently to uncover the truth. I call on Congress to provide the women who have been victimized by Epstein with a public hearing specifically centered around the survivors. Give these victims their opportunity to testify under oath in front of Congress with the power of sworn testimony. Each and every woman should have her day to tell her story in public if she wishes, and then her testimony should be permanently entered into the congressional record. Then, and only then, we will have the truth.
Whether those lawsuits ultimately proceeded to conclusion or were resolved behind closed doors, the pattern of legal threats itself tells us something meaningful about how Melania views these claims. Let's step back for a moment and consider the broader context, because this rumor doesn't exist in isolation. The entire Epstein saga has remained a burning political and cultural issue for years, long past the point when most scandals would have faded from public consciousness. Questions about who associated with Epstein, what they knew, and how accountability has been doled out continue to generate real news coverage and genuine public concern. That backdrop of ongoing scrutiny makes any new claim connecting prominent figures to Epstein immediately newsworthy, regardless of whether the specific claim has actually been verified. This is where things get particularly complicated. The larger Epstein story involves genuine criminal activity, real victims, and legitimate questions about how his network operated with apparent impunity for so many years. But the existence of that genuine scandal doesn't automatically validate every allegation made against every person who ever crossed paths with Epstein in any context. The two things need to be evaluated separately, with actual evidence supporting each specific claim rather than assuming guilt by association or guilt by proximity to a broader investigation. The public fascination with Melania Trump specifically adds another layer to all of this. She has always maintained a certain mystique, a carefully crafted public image that reveals relatively little about her private life. That privacy, combined with her background as a model who moved in glamorous international circles, creates a fertile ground for speculation. When people don't know the full story, they tend to fill in the gaps with whatever narrative seems most compelling, whether or not it has any basis in reality. The modeling world, particularly in the 1990s when Melania was establishing her career, has its own complicated history. It was a time when boundaries were often blurred, when young women trying to make their way in a competitive industry were sometimes vulnerable to exploitation, when powerful men could leverage their influence in ways that would be unacceptable today. That genuine context of potential vulnerability makes allegations of this nature feel plausible to many people, even when the specific claims lack supporting evidence. But plausibility is not proof, and that's where we need to be careful. It's entirely possible that something inappropriate happened decades ago that nobody has ever been able to prove. It's also entirely possible that nothing inappropriate happened, and this is simply a case of false allegations being recycled over and over because they're sensational and generate attention. We simply don't know, and treating an unverified claim as if it were established fact is neither fair nor intellectually honest. The current information environment makes this kind of speculation especially dangerous. A single dramatic claim can reach millions of people within hours, with each sharing adding another layer of apparent credibility through sheer repetition. The more people share a story, the more it feels like it must be true, even when the underlying evidence remains completely unchanged. This creates a situation where false or unverified claims can achieve widespread acceptance simply by being repeated often enough. Here's the thing that responsible coverage needs to wrestle with honestly. The fact that a claim has been denied, even vigorously denied, doesn't automatically prove it's false. People lie about things all the time, especially when the truth would be damaging to their reputation or interests. The fact that someone sued over a claim doesn't automatically prove the claim was false either. Lawsuits can be filed for strategic reasons, to discourage further discussion, to create legal consequences for repeating something, regardless of whether the underlying claim happens to be true. This is why we need to evaluate claims based on the actual evidence available, not based on who denies them or who repeats them. And the actual evidence available in this case is remarkably thin. We have one person's account of what someone else supposedly told them privately. We have no way to verify that the private conversation ever happened as described, no way to verify that the person making the allegation isn't misremembering or misunderstanding or deliberately misrepresenting what was said. The person at the center of the alleged confession, Paolo Zampoli, has consistently denied that he ever made such statements. He has pushed back against the characterization of their private conversations and suggested that his accuser may have motivations for making these claims that go beyond simply telling the truth. That denial doesn't prove anything either, but it does create a clear conflict of accounts with no independent arbiter available to resolve who is being truthful. Let's think about what actual proof would look like in a case like this. It would involve some documented evidence that Melania was connected to Epstein in a way that goes beyond the casual acquaintance that many people had with him. It would involve records of payments, communications, travel that can be independently verified. It would involve witnesses who were actually present and can corroborate specific events. It would involve something beyond one person saying that another person told them something years ago. We don't have any of that. We have the same allegation, recycled through different messengers over the course of nearly a decade, none of whom have ever produced any new evidence to support it. Each new version adds a slightly different detail, a new name, a slightly different framing that makes it feel fresh and relevant, but the core claim remains entirely unsubstantiated by anything beyond the word of whoever is making the allegation in this particular cycle. The repetition itself is actually telling us something important. Claims that are true tend to accumulate evidence over time. More witnesses come forward, documents are discovered, patterns emerge that support the original allegation. Claims that are false, or at least unsubstantiated, tend to just keep repeating the same basic story, with no new supporting evidence ever materializing. The Melania escort rumor falls squarely into the second category. Year after year, the same basic claim keeps appearing with new messengers, but no new proof. Let's go back to where this all started, because understanding the origin helps explain why the story keeps coming back. The first major public airing of this allegation came through a UK tabloid publication back in 2016, just as Donald Trump was emerging as a serious presidential candidate. The timing was not coincidental. Political opponents, opposition researchers, and tabloid journalists were all digging frantically for anything that could damage Trump or his family. This was the environment in which the original story emerged. Tabloid journalism operates by different standards than serious news organizations. The goal is to generate attention and sell copies, not necessarily to establish verified facts. A salacious story about a candidate's wife was exactly the kind of content that a tabloid would run with, whether or not the story had been properly vetted. And once published, the story was out there, available to be cited and recirculated forever, regardless of whether it had ever been confirmed. Melania's response was immediate and aggressive. The lawsuit against the Daily Mail sent a clear message that these allegations would not be tolerated, that she would spend significant money and effort to fight back through the legal system rather than letting the story stand unchallenged. This is not the behavior of someone who is hoping the story just quietly goes away. It's the behavior of someone who is genuinely angry and determined to defend their reputation. The lawsuit itself is a matter of public record, and it provides important context that often gets lost when the story resurfaces. This wasn't just a denial, a statement from a press representative saying the allegations are false, and we're not going to dignify them with a response. This was a serious legal action seeking substantial financial damages, a response that tells you something significant about how Melania viewed the original story and the impact it was having on her life. Throughout the years since that original lawsuit, the pattern has remained consistent. Every time the claim resurfaces, Melania responds with legal threats or aggressive denials. Hunter Biden got a billion-dollar threat. The most recent version from Amanda Angaro prompted a public statement calling the claims mean-spirited attempts to defame her reputation. There's been no softening of the response, no quiet acceptance, no strategic calculation that it's better to just let it fade away. Each new version is met with the same forceful pushback. Now we need to talk about Amanda Angaro, the most recent messenger carrying this story into public view. Understanding who she is and what her situation was at the time she made these claims is essential for evaluating how much weight to give her allegations. Angaro is a former model from Brazil who was in a relationship with Paulo Zampoli, the same man who represented Melania in the 1990s and who is credited with introducing her to Donald Trump. She is also the mother of Zampoli's child. Here's where the context gets complicated. At the time Angaro made these claims, she was in the middle of an active custody dispute with Zampoli over their child. She had also recently been deported from the United States, a situation she has reportedly claimed Zampoli may have influenced through his connections with immigration authorities. These are not small details to be brushed aside. They represent significant personal motivations that could potentially affect Angaro's willingness to make damaging claims about her ex-partner and the powerful people connected to him. Let's be very clear about what this does and doesn't mean. Does the existence of a custody dispute and a deportation automatically make Angaro's claims false? Absolutely not. People in contentious legal situations can still tell the truth. The allegations they make can still be completely accurate regardless of their personal motivations for making them. But the context does mean that any responsible evaluation of her claims needs to consider whether there might be alternative explanations for why she would say these things. Could Angaro be making these claims because they're true, because Zampoli really did make these confessions to her over the years, and she feels a duty to expose the truth regardless of the personal consequences? Yes, that's one possibility. Could she be making these claims because she's angry about the custody situation, wants to damage Zampoli's reputation, and sees connecting him to the Epstein saga as an effective way to cause maximum harm? That's another possibility. Could there be a mix of both motivations, or could something else entirely be going on? All of these are theoretically possible. This is why we need evidence beyond the person making the allegation. When someone has clear personal motivations to make a damaging claim against someone else, we need additional confirmation before accepting that claim as true. Not because people with motivations can't tell the truth, but because motivations create incentives to distort or fabricate, and we need to be sure we're not being led astray by someone who has a personal agenda. The custody dispute adds another layer of complexity because it means there are ongoing legal proceedings where these issues could potentially have been raised. If Zampoli had really confessed to being involved in facilitating an escort arrangement with Epstein, that would be potentially relevant information in a custody case, raising questions about his judgment and character. The fact that this wasn't brought up in that context might suggest something about how seriously Ungaro herself views these claims, though that's far from conclusive. Zampoli, for his part, has firmly denied any wrongdoing in the situation with Ungaro and has pushed back against her characterization of their private conversations. He has reportedly suggested that she might benefit from professional support given everything she's been through with the custody dispute and immigration situation. This is, of course, exactly what someone accused of wrongdoing would say, regardless of whether they were actually guilty. Denials from accused parties don't prove innocence any more than accusations prove guilt. But the fact that we have two directly conflicting accounts without any independent evidence to resolve the dispute is significant. One person says private confessions were made over many years. The other person says no such confessions ever happened. Without some third source to verify who is telling the truth, we're left with nothing but competing claims, neither of which can be confirmed or disproven based on available information. In such a situation, the responsible course is to treat the allegation as unverified rather than accepting it as established fact. The deletion of the original recording where Ungaro made these claims is also worth noting. The person who initially posted the recording online said he did so at Ungaro's direct request. Later, reporting indicates she asked him to take it down. The recording had already spread widely by that point, making the deletion largely irrelevant to the public circulation of the content. But the fact that she asked for it to be removed might suggest some second thoughts, some concern about the consequences of having made these allegations publicly. Of course, it could also be that the recording continued to generate attention she didn't want, or that she was pressured by others to try to contain the story. We can't know the reasons for the deletion request, but it is another piece of context that belongs in any complete discussion of this story. The initial posting and subsequent deletion both tell us something about how this information has been handled, even if neither action settles the question of whether the allegations are true. Let's talk about what fact-checking organizations have found when they've looked into these claims. Multiple organizations that specialize in tracing viral claims back to their original sources have investigated this story in various iterations since 2016. Their consistent conclusion has been that there simply isn't credible evidence supporting these allegations. They've traced the rumor back to sources with documented histories of spreading unsubstantiated claims, and they've found no independent verification for any of the specific assertions that have been made. These organizations typically reach out directly to the people involved or their representatives as part of their fact-checking process. Sometimes they get responses, sometimes they don't. The silence from certain parties could be interpreted in different ways, but it's worth noting that the consistent lack of supporting evidence has led these organizations to rate the claim as unsubstantiated or false. Their conclusions aren't partisan, they're based on what evidence is and isn't available. The broader information environment makes fact-checking particularly challenging in cases like this. A sensational claim travels extremely quickly, reaching millions of people within hours. The fact-checking response, which requires careful analysis and often involves reaching out to sources for comment, takes much longer. By the time a thorough fact check is published, the original claim has already been seen by countless people, many of whom will never see the correction. This asymmetry is one of the defining features of modern media. There's something genuinely fascinating about how this rumor has managed to survive and thrive for nearly a decade, despite never having been substantiated. Each time it fades from public view, someone revives it with just enough of a fresh angle to make it feel like new information. A new name, a new alleged source, a new recording, a new context, but always the same core claim underneath. This pattern of perpetual resurrection is worth examining in its own right because it reveals something important about how viral content operates in our current ecosystem. The specific formula that keeps this story alive involves combining a high-profile figure with a known scandalous name and a suggestion of hidden knowledge. Melania Trump plus Jeffrey Epstein plus a secret introduction equals a story that practically writes itself. It has all the elements of a blockbuster narrative: a beautiful woman with a mysterious past, a disgraced financier with ties to everyone powerful, a presidential marriage that has always generated public curiosity. When you put those ingredients together, you get guaranteed attention. The irony is that the attention itself becomes part of the story. The fact that the rumor keeps coming back is treated as evidence that there must be something to it. Why would so many different people keep raising this issue if there wasn't any truth behind it? This logic is superficially appealing, but ultimately flawed. False rumors can spread widely and persist for long periods, especially when they're sensational and involve public figures. The persistence of a rumor tells us more about human psychology than it does about the truth of the underlying claim. People are naturally drawn to scandal. We like stories about the powerful being brought low, about hidden secrets being exposed, about official narratives being overturned. These narratives tap into something deep in human psychology, a fascination with transgression and a desire to believe that the people who seem to have it all might actually be hiding something. This psychological predisposition makes us more receptive to allegations, even when there's no evidence to support them. The role of social media in perpetuating this kind of story cannot be overstated. Platforms designed to maximize engagement are naturally drawn to sensational content. Algorithms that prioritize sharing and interaction will always favor a dramatic allegation over a careful fact check. A short audio clip with a shocking claim is much more likely to go viral than a lengthy article explaining why that claim can't be verified. This creates an environment where unsubstantiated allegations are systematically privileged over responsible reporting. The political context also matters. Any claim that might damage a political opponent will be embraced by those who oppose them, regardless of whether the claim is proven. The same claim will be dismissed by supporters of the target, regardless of whether the claim might be true. This partisan dynamic makes it almost impossible to evaluate allegations objectively once they become entangled in political tribal loyalties. The people who share the Melania story enthusiastically often do so because they dislike Trump, not because they've carefully evaluated the evidence. This is why the consistent pattern of legal responses from Melania's team matters. When someone threatens a lawsuit over an allegation, that's not the same as proving the allegation false, but it does introduce legal stakes that might discourage people from casually repeating the claim. The billion-dollar threat against Hunter Biden was obviously more performative than practical, but it still signaled the seriousness with which these claims are viewed. Legal threats don't prove innocence, but they do raise the cost of repeating allegations. It's worth considering whether the Melania story would have persisted if the legal responses had been different. What if she had simply ignored the original tabloid story in 2016? What if she had never sued? Some observers might have treated her silence as an admission, might have assumed the story must be true if she wasn't fighting it. By being aggressive in her response, she prevented the story from becoming accepted as truth through silence, though she couldn't prevent it from being repeatedly revived. The absence of any new evidence is ultimately the most significant factor in evaluating this story. Nearly a decade after the claim first surfaced publicly, we still have nothing beyond initial allegations and their later reiterations. No one has produced documents. No one has come forward with photographs or financial records. No one has presented anything that would allow an independent observer to verify any of the specific claims that have been made. The story remains exactly where it started, in the realm of unsubstantiated allegation. This doesn't mean the allegations are false. It's entirely possible that something inappropriate happened decades ago that has never been documented or proven. It's entirely possible that Melania has successfully suppressed any evidence that might support the claims against her. It's entirely possible that the right person with the right information hasn't come forward yet. But possibilities are not evidence, and the lack of evidence is what we need to acknowledge when we're evaluating what can responsibly be concluded about this story. The most recent iteration of the rumor involving Amanda Ungaro follows the same pattern as all the previous versions. A new source makes the same claim, presenting it as insider information. The story spreads rapidly across social media. Headlines declare that the truth has finally been revealed, and then, upon closer examination, we discover that there's still no actual evidence behind the allegation, just another person saying what someone else supposedly told them years ago. Angaro's personal situation adds another dimension to the story that deserves attention. A custody dispute and a deportation provide clear motivations that could explain why she might want to damage Zampoli, and by extension the powerful people connected to him. Again, this doesn't automatically make her claims false, but it does mean we need to be especially careful before accepting them as truth. The presence of personal motivations doesn't disprove allegations, but it does make independent verification more important than ever. What would it take for this story to finally be established as fact? It would require something beyond the repetition of the same claim through different messengers. It would require independent documentary evidence. Financial records showing payments, travel records showing meetings, photographs or videos that established connections that go beyond casual acquaintance, multiple sources corroborating the same details. It would require the kind of evidence that journalists and investigators have been looking for since 2016 and haven't been able to find. For now, what we have is a case study in modern information dynamics, a dramatic unverified claim, a source with personal motivations, a rapid spread across platforms, an absence of supporting evidence, and a pattern of aggressive denial from the person being accused. This is the anatomy of a viral rumor in the 21st century, and it's worth understanding the pattern so we can recognize it when we encounter it in the future. The broader lesson here isn't specific to Melania Trump or to this particular allegation. It's about how we handle information in an environment where dramatic claims travel faster than careful verification. The habit of asking what evidence exists beyond the claim itself, of pausing before sharing something that makes us angry or confirms our biases, of waiting for independent confirmation before treating an allegation as fact, these habits are becoming increasingly essential to maintaining some grip on what's actually true. Stories like this one will keep appearing because they generate attention, and attention generates engagement, and engagement generates revenue. The underlying economics of media production, especially in the digital space, makes sensational claims incredibly valuable. The incentive to create and share dramatic allegations will always exist, regardless of whether those allegations are true. This is a structural feature of the current media environment, not something that can be blamed on any particular actor or platform. The best defense against unsubstantiated claims is skeptical thinking, especially towards stories we want to believe. Until independently verified evidence emerges, the Melania rumor remains an unproven allegation, and treating it as fact is the difference between responsible journalism and sensationalism. The distinction between proof and allegation is fundamental.